when I was writing this Bardo Thödol book, the 3 books, this one here is called The Tibetan Book of the Dead by Gyurme. This is basically the best translation of the Tibetan Book of the Dead in English that exists. And so I had to use this one. And when I finally saw this particular book in a bookshop in Nepal, Kathmandu, when I was there, I immediately bought it, because then I said, oh, now I can write this book on the Bardo Thödol. And so there's some of the plates in there, some of the ruffled deities. So when I got this book, that's when I started writing the book. That was many, many years ago. The other book that I was using is this one here by Evans Wentz. This is a very rare, expensive version of it. Most of you know the paperback, but it's the hardcover version with this Vajra in front. And then the other book I was using is this book called The Secret Doctrines of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which was very useful, by Dieter Ingo-Lof. There's a lot of good information there, and sometimes I quoted from this. So to write a book like the one I did, I needed a very good word-for-word translation with the best modern scholarship that existed, which is this one. Evans Wentz's book, which was translated not by him, by Lama Kaza Dawa Sandup. This one here is a translation, but it's not word for word. It's a generalized translation, and therefore it can't really be used, only as a backup, because I need the proper translation. And then the best scholarship on the esoteric interpretation of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So with these 3 books as my foundation, and then of course this particular book here, I won't go into my hardcover book, I showed it to you before, the Tibetan Book of the Great Liberation is another aspect of the Tibetan Book of the Dead by Evans Wentz. And this one here you can all get, that's quite a good read. And it's called The Method of Realizing Nirvana Through Knowing the Mind. So it's the Tibetan Book of the Great Liberation. And so this is a certain chapter of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Now, this particular book here is needed for the explanation of this little volume 5, part B of the Bardo Thödol. That's scholasticism for you. And so if any of you want to write books, then the first thing you do is find the very best books on the subject and study them very well. And once you know the philosophy and whatever is in those books by those scholars, then you can bring out your own interpretation or version, what's sometimes called rendition. And so that's what mine is about. Now, in my writing of the Bardo Thödol, I didn't go into the whole book, only about 3 chapters. That's all I could write. I'd use so many pages just explaining those. You can imagine where I would be going through every aspect of the whole Tibetan. There's just so much information in all of these tantras. What I want to try to give to you as much as I can is the Tibetan mind structure, but it's not so much the way the Tibetans may be now, but there's many, many that inherit this, because the Tibetans themselves are very devotional, very, very religious. The older Tibetans, some of the younger may not be. When I was in India, they'd be playing soccer and things like that. But the older ones, they're still doing their prayer wheels and all the rest of it. Very, very religious, sort of for them. To send their sons off to a monastery was the highest privilege that they could do. In our Western world, to send, some parent thinking that if their son became a monk, that would be the highest possible thing they could do for society. What Westerner things like that? Everything is religious and everything is the yogi way. The yogis were the kings of that religion. Not so much even the monks, the yogis. The true yogis, those that came out of meditation with those powers, right, and could demonstrate that. And in Tibetan history, there's many such. So as I said, I'll start, and I'll be reading this out and explaining to you, and of course you can all read yourself. And so it's basically just reading out with some commentary, and where I think a commentary is necessary, and then you will get a flavor of what the Tibetan mindset is about. And of course, there's a picture of Guru Rinpoche. All of you know it. You can get it from my book. And in an earlier book, I give some of the symbolism, for instance, the Katvanga. Everything to do with him. There's not one aspect of what he is wearing that hasn't got profound symbolism. You could write a whole book just on those clothes. I mean, a whole book, a big book, just on that, nothing else. Everything that's there. Now, this philosophy is what's called the Yogacarya Madhyamika. Tibetan Buddhism, its schools, all of you probably know, but there's the Nyingma, there's the Geluk, there's the Kagyu, and there's the Sakya. These four main schools, and after that it's the Bonpa, which are technically the black magicians, right? So that produces the 5 schools. But the 4 main schools, they will have sub-schools. But there's only really 3 main ones, the Geluk and the Nyingma and the Kagyu. And the Geluk is what the Dalai Lama follows. And all these 3 schools are Madhyamika, which means the middle way. And their doctrine is of Shunyata. And there's the school, for instance, that our brothers are following is a Zen school, which follows the Yogacarya, which is the way of mind. The Madhyamika is Tibetan, very, very largely Tibetan. The Nyingma, which is what the Tibetan Book of the Dead is about, because Guru Rinpoche, or Padmasambhava is not a name, means a lotus-born one, and Rinpoche in Tibet means precious one. So the precious guru. So he's the founder of Tibetan Buddhism, about 800 circa AD, and he was called to Tibet because, well, the king of Tibet had 2 wives and they're both Buddhists, and so they converted him, and he called a teacher, Sangharakshita, to teach the Tibetans Buddhism, because they are shamans, basically, Bonpa, the indigenous religion, which is basically black magic. But then Sangharakshita, who was a very renowned teacher, couldn't make headway with them because he was opposed by the black magicians. He was dealing seriously with all of that. And so the Sangharakshita and the Tibetan king said, well, we need somebody who is a specialist in psychic attack and dealing with black magic, exorcising. And so they called the most powerful of the magicians, the Tibetan enlightened beings, in other words, a magician, to Tibet, who was Guru Rinpoche. It took him quite a long time. He came from Kashmir and then passed through, eventually through Nepal, but stayed on the way. So Guru Rinpoche, who is the most, siddhi is the Sanskrit term for psychic power. And so he is the one with exemplary siddhis, the most enlightened. We know Guru Rinpoche as Jupiter, who the Bailey people or the Blavatsky people called him. So Master Jupiter doesn't have an ashram per se, but he's above, just a little bit above the rank of Kohan. So he was called one of the highest members of hierarchy. And then he came to Tibet and then started zapping away all the DB. There's a statue of him. Now this thing here is called a Katvanga. I explained this in one of my books. This is an 18th century statue of Guru Rinpoche. It's very, very oxidized. And then this here is a probably about 1850 picture of him. It's very, very beautiful picture, actually. Very, very fine lines. This one here I carry with me wherever I go. So he's the founder of Tibetan Buddhism, but he's also the founder of the Nyingma tradition, which is the old sect. And they Yogacarya Madhyamika. Those three different sects are different versions of the Madhyamika. Now, the Yogacarya are the mind, the way of the mind, or the way of yoga. They're the masters of yoga. The Yogacarya philosophy, using the teachings of Vasubandhu and Asanga, mixed with the Madhyamika. But these Nyingma are the magicians, if you want, of Tibet. They're the ones that develop siddhis through yoga. They're the ones who use the purba for their rituals. They're the red hats, the Gelukka, the yellow hats, and the Kagyu also wear the red. So they're the most ancient, the oldest tradition, and they're the ones that do the ritual. They were always called forth to cause hail, to make it rain over when it's a drought on, heal people through their magic. It's ritual magic is what they were specialists in. And there are still some Nyingma that have that sort of capacity. So it's this Nyingma school specifically and its philosophy, which the Bardo Thödol, which they call the Tibetan Book of the Dead, but the proper name of it, of this particular book, is Introduction to Awareness. Natural liberation through naked perception shall be used. So there's natural liberation through naked perception or listening. Now, naked perception is the naked perception of the mind. When it means naked, it's the mind is not adorned with anything. There's no thought constructs there, no ideas of samsara, no ideas of male, female, no ideas of this world and its constructs, no ideas of whatever you think is the universe or God. It's naked of all of that. It just is pure perception, and which instantly realizes the truth of anything that it sees. So it's natural liberation by means of awakening that type of mind. It's empty of anything that you can think of that makes your world real. Evans Wentz calls it, here follows the yoga of knowing the mind, the seeing of reality from the profound doctrine of self-liberation by meditating upon the peaceful and wrathful deities. And those of you who have bothered or tried or struggled with volume 1 of this particular book knows that the peaceful and wrathful deities, and to get your brain around it is a lot of work. They're not easy to understand. And there's lots of terms that you've never heard of, stacks of names, Tibetan concepts, and a whole tanka. I actually do have an old tanka wrapped up somewhere of them. I have about 17 or so tankas, or 15 tankas. The book, therefore, is part of the Nyingma tradition that was founded by Guru Rinpoche because he needed to zap away all the DB before the first Buddhist monastery could be established in Tibet. So you can understand massive DB opposition, because the last thing the Dark Brotherhood wanted, you can imagine, is for Buddhism to take root in Tibet or in that high mountainous area. And the last thing in the world they wanted. And so the highest zapping entity that existed incarnated to assist in this cleansing of that part of the world, or certain part of it, so that Buddhism could start to sprout. It took another 100 or so years. There was a resurgence of the Dark Brotherhood, and then finally the White Brotherhood took over and expanded the power base to eventually bring on a Tibetan religion. And this was at the same time when the Muslims, the Muslim horde, were conquering India. And now the Muslims hated Buddhism. It was not one of the religions of the book. They followed and worshipped all of these, from the Muslim point of view, gods. And they did whatever they could to destroy the monasteries, destroy the monks. The great monasteries such as Nalanda were destroyed. But just prior to this, Buddhism escaped to Tibet. And so it was basically wiped out, not totally, but almost totally wiped out in India, and escaped to Tibet, went off to China and then to Japan. And of course, the Theravada Buddhism went to Ceylon and Sri Lanka and Burma. So you can see the way hierarchy works. Everything is pre-planned. and the movement onwards. And it was fortunate in the sense, is it not, that Buddhism went to Tibet. The Tibetans, once they got established there, they sent out into Tibet just before the Muslims came. They sent, for instance, Mapa. He was called Mapa the translator. He was the teacher of Milarepa, and he went into India searching for a guru, and he finally found his teacher, Naropa, who was another one of these great ones, similar spiritual age to Guru Rinpoche. Naropa probably was the one we now call the European Kohan. You've got of that level. Naropa's teacher, as far as I can figure out, was an incarnation of the Christ. But what I'm getting to is that he went there and brought back into Tibet all these Sanskrit texts, because Tibetans didn't really read Sanskrit, actually derived the Tibetan language from the Sanskrit, and then they translated the Sanskrit texts into Tibetan. And then there was a whole host of others that went into India and brought back their sacred texts, everything they could find. Of course, they were in love with Buddhism, so they had to find the sources and brought it all back. And of course, some stuff, of course, eventually went off to China, and from China to Japan. And then the Muslims came and burnt down the monasteries and all the rest of that. But the books on the whole were by then safely ensconced in Tibet, and the Muslims couldn't conquer Tibet. They tried. They actually did try, but their armies were routed. It was a little bit too cold for them up there, I think. Couldn't breathe. That's just a little bit of background in terms of this particular period of time, from about 800 onwards to about 1,000. Milarepa is about 1,020 or something like that, the turn of the millennia. Other great scholars were invited from India to Tibet, such as Sangharakshita and sort of Guru Rinpoche. These were Indian. Many others were to teach the Tibetans, to bring their books, and so the religion eventually flourished, and we eventually get from the Nyingma the other sects, like the Gelugpa, which is the Dalai Lama yellow hat, originally came from Atisha, who actually was an incarnation of Serapis, the fourth ray Kohan. So all of the great ones, of course, from then onwards found their way in, or incarnated into Tibet, and did their work there. So what we're getting to, therefore, it's similar to where we're going to with this new age, yes? We've got to convert the DB. You got to zap them away. They're not going to give up their power base in the minds of humanity that easy. Mass human consciousness that we're converting. The initiates, right? We're trying to make a safe zone. We're trying to bring in a new world religion. We're trying to externalize hierarchy. That means zapping and zapping and zapping. No, why other way? Likewise with Tibet, the same thing. Zapping and zapping and zapping, and then the religion could be established. And so the early lamas, the gurus, they all had to zap. So the Nyingma, their tradition is a yoga tradition. That's what Yogacharya means. It's a yoga tradition. The Gelugpa is not, sometimes it's called a consequential school. That's the Dalai Lama school. They do debating, and you've seen them maybe in their robes or pictures of them going like that and arguing, and they do it through logic. Now, the text starts like this, so knowing the peaceful and wrathful deities. Now, I'm not going to go into the peaceful and wrathful deities in this book. They're too vast and complicated and will be there for a whole year. Now, the other thing all of you need to know is the extreme devotion of the Tibetans. I tried to bring this out before. The genuine sort of Muslims are also very devotional. And so it's a very, very devotional and genuine. But they devote themselves to the concept of the guru and the concept of enlightenment via the yoga methodology. Different to our West. All of these Tibetan books, all these Sanskrit books, all of they start off with these homages. So first of all, you've got to invoke and bring in the deities, and you've got to say thank you to all of those that were your predecessors, that gave you the religion, that did the yoga, that were the enlightened ones. Without them, nothing can happen. So it's homage to the deities embodying the three Buddha bodies, who are the natural radiance of awareness. Now, the three Buddha bodies is what's called the Dharmakaya, the Sambhogakaya, and the Nirmanakaya. And this translates in our philosophy as the monad or monadic perception. The Sambhogakaya is the soul or the soul realm. And then Nirmanakaya is the embodiment. For instance, I'm a Nirmanakaya, you're Nirmanakayas. And so it's the three bodies of a Buddha, can call it body, speech, and mind. Of course, with these terms, it's the whole Buddhist philosophy that's involved in it. Nothing in a Buddhist philosophy is simple. It's not easy to explain. Yeah. Kaya means body, Dharmakaya means the body of the Dharma. And the body of the Dharma is not just what you read in these books. It's cosmic mind. It's the nakedness of the Dharma without any of your occultating mind structures and thought forms interfering. It's the truth of cosmos, of whatever it is that caused everything that came into being, the way it really is. And then that's translated as law, the law that we all follow in our hearts when we're traveling the path to enlightenment. That makes us climb a mountain. It's universal mind. It's very hard to translate these concepts. The Hindus use the term nirvana or moksha sometimes to try to describe the same sort of thing. So the Sambhogakaya is roughly related to the realm of the soul. Now, when you look at a tanka, like this one here, and you'll see all the aura and all the stuff around it, and often you'll see the paradise realm of the deity and other entities and deities and things like that. You know, all of you have looked at tankas. That's the Sambhogakaya realm. It's the realm that appears in your meditation mind. It's an emanation of the Dharmakaya, but it's clothed in thought form. It's clothed in the thought form of the peaceful and the wrathful deities. The 48 peaceful and the 52 wrathful deities, there we are. It's all clothed in that, or anything else that the tanka is showing. So it's the soul level. And this soul level is on the higher mental plane. The Dharmakaya is monadic. It's on the cosmic, the cosmic ethers, onwards, upwards, from Buddhi upwards. And then the Nirmanakaya is the physical appearance of a Buddha. Now, they're not talking so much, for instance, now I am a physical appearance, but I'm not yet a Buddha. And so they're talking about something like Guru Rinpoche here, with all of that radiance and all of that power. It's just pure ability that has conquered space, that can absolutely master all the three worlds of human livingness within the form. So it's a completely enlightened being, but master of samsara in every aspect of it. Technically, that's what a Nirmanakaya is, but in reality, the Nirmanakaya is just simply the appearance of an enlightened being. So you get an idea, therefore, of that Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya. And there's a fourth body of the Buddha, which is not here because it's quite a controversial subject in Buddhism a little bit. It's called the Svabhavikaya. The three of those bodies in one. So we go, here I shall present the teachings known as the Introduction to Awareness, the Natural Liberation through Naked Perception, which is an extract from the peaceful and wrathful deities, a profound sacred teaching entitled Natural Liberation through Recognition of Enlightened Intention. So you get an idea that these terms, so you got a short Buddhist word or tiny little phrase, but it's all of these concepts that is in that title. And it's the concepts that are quite important. Therefore, you can basically see a book like the Bardo Thödol, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Now, this particular book, which was written by Guru Rinpoche back in those days, now this is read out in Tibet. Whenever somebody dies, they read out this Tibetan Book of the Dead for 49 days over the body of the deceased. Of course, those that are reading it out, the lamas, they get paid for it, but they don't really understand what they're reading. It's just simply their tradition, because that is the guide to helping those that are deceased to survive the after death. But what it really is a book on meditation, on liberation. Thus shall I introduce to you the nature of intrinsic awareness. So contemplate it well, O fortunate child of Buddha nature. Now, intrinsic awareness, of course, again, is the nakedness of your mind that is not clothed with anything. So you get an idea. If you are naked and you're walking down the street, people will be pointing at you and you'd probably be a bit ashamed of yourself, because your mind and everyone else has got ideas about the body of the flesh and it should be clothed and whatever. But the nakedness is absolutely the way it really is. Now, when he says, "O fortunate child of Buddha nature," now the Buddha nature, that's what's intrinsic with all of you. And why is it a fortunate child? Because you've actually met somebody who can teach you how to become enlightened, how to master samsara. And for the Buddhists, that is the most fortunate thing. For us Westerners, somebody can give you $1 million. Now that's a fortunate thing, right? But for the Buddhists, that doesn't matter. The yogin, the money, means nothing. Well, what's important is being a yogi in a cave and meeting somebody like that can actually teach you how to become enlightened. Then you're the most fortunate person in this world, in the universe, and their way of thinking. There are many Charlton teachers. There are many teachers that profess to know. And if you find one of them, then you're not very fortunate. You're going to waste a lot of your time and energy practicing practices that are not going to get you anywhere. They'll get you into illusions and Dark Brotherhood practices, activities, manifesting karma for yourself. That's most unfortunate. Fortunate is to find that one precious guru out of the hundreds. And then they use a mantra on it, Samaya, ya. Now, Evan once says, this mantra indicates that the teachings about to be given are too profound and esoteric to be taught to or comprehended by any save yogically purified and disciplined disciples. So they're incredibly profound. Now, it's not to be given to those lamas that are busy reading out the Tibetan Book of the Dead, deceased. They're not purified. You're fortunate because you're able to cleanse your threefold sheaths. You're able to become yogins yourself, or yoginis. The reference to disciples as being blessed or karmically fortunate confirms this. The treatise before us may therefore be regarded as appertaining to the secret law of the gurus. In the eyes of initiate Tibetans of this school, the mantra itself is equivalent to a seal of secrecy placed upon those teachings, which is ya. Sometimes in some of the esoteric manuscripts, the seal of secrecy takes the form of a carefully drawn double doje, or Visvavajra, which is in the back of my books, perhaps in color, such as appears in the cover of this volume. The Sanskrit samaya of our text corresponds to the Tibetan form tongpa, meaning thorough perception, infallible knowledge, complete realization of truth. It also means self-realization or self-knowledge. Togpa cannot be thoroughly comprehended without a practice of yoga. The first step assists in comprehending Togpa intellectually. This is what you're doing now. The second, in deepening or expanding the comprehension by study. The third, in meditating upon it, and so forth. And the fourth, in fully comprehending it. Such complete comprehension being equivalent to realization of Buddhahood. The thrice repeated nya is a Tibetan expression translated as vast. The mantra may therefore be rendered as vast as divine wisdom. So you understand what they are really getting to when you look at my writings. And you add it to DK's writings and the Blavatsky writings, and then you spread it out to all the other revealed truths, and then you get a bit of understanding of what they mean. But these are just exoteric. It's the esoteric, the ear-whispered truths that is truly vast, that expands into comprehension of or knowledge of the universe, of cosmos, of travel into space. It's amazing, is it not, that all of us that living in this three-dimensional world and the way we've been conditioned to let go of our conditionings, and that's what yoga teaches you, so that eventually you free yourself for concepts of whatever you think is, so that you can travel out in cosmic space, enter into the mind of God, the mind of the creator of the universe, if that's the way you think of God. The Tibetans avoid the use of God, but that's what they're really talking about. The mind of that which is the creator or the manifestor of everything that is around you, and you becoming part of that. You know, the moving galaxies, the stars, everything. And it's all possible within the framework of your little brain consciousness. Your head lotus awakened. Okay, that's the beginning of the book. So you can see just the vastness of what they're trying to explain, and it's all hidden in the concept of mantra. And in the Nyingma tradition, we have a phrase, secret mantra. The mantra that is hidden or veiled, and that secret mantra is the enlightened mind, or what it reveals to you.